This is a film about a visit to see the fascinating remote Dallol area of Ethiopia's Danakil Depression, which holds the title as the hottest inhabited place on Earth with an average year-round temperature of 34 degrees centigrade or 94 degrees Fahrenheit. The area is commonly known as the Gateway to Hell. Arriving at Dallol, we stayed in Hamed Ela, which is a small hamlet whose lifeblood is the salt trade based on the nearby Lake Assale, a huge salt lake. Hamed Ela has many small shelters with walls built from dry sticks and roofs made from straw mats with plastic sheets on top. We didn't stay in a hut since it was so hot that people sleep outside on wooden frame beds with a woven platform. The huts were used for cooking. There was no privacy as we were outside and animals and people wander around everywhere. The hellacious daytime temperatures of 44 degrees centigrade or 111 degrees Fahrenheit means that activity on the salt flats is generally restricted to the morning or evening hours. Although Lake Assale is mostly a vast dry salt plain in the dry season, there was still some very salty surface water which needed to be forded to get to the dry salt plain. The potential for damage to the vehicles from this salt bath meant that the drivers were keen to get to the car wash at Camel. Once on the salt plain, we drove out to see the traditional salt mining operation. The use of camels is widespread in the Afar region, as the camel is ideally suited to the desert environment and can carry 4 times as much as a horse. The average camel can haul 600 pounds or 275 kilograms up to 20 miles per day at 2 to 3 miles per hour over an 8-hour day for 2 months at a time. The camel caravan that we met was heading out to pick up loads of salt blocks from the salt mining operation. Camels are becoming an anachronism in salt mining as the construction of a road network in the area led by the Chinese means that trucks are replacing camels as prime movers. Salt is found stuck on everything in the area due to its high moisture content. Every morning, men head out on the salt flats where they cleave the top layer of salt open with hand axes to extract the salt, just as has been done since the 6th century. With the coming of the roads, industry has started to entrench in the area, which threatens the future of traditional salt mining. A salt plant has been built that pumps water from the lake into evaporation ponds, creating a salt that is said to be of a better quality but more costly than the blocks mined from the lake bed. Hence, the days of traditional backbreaking salt mining are probably numbered. Impressively, the Lake Assale salt formation is about 2 kilometers or 1.25 miles thick. It was formed when an arm of the Red Sea was isolated by earth movements, after which the seawater evaporated, leaving behind its salt. There was an impressive backlog of salt slabs awaiting shipment. In the next couple of years, this traditional method of salt mining will probably disappear into the history books, and with it, the salt camel caravans. Just before sunset at 5:30 p.m. we drove out to the north end of Lake Karum to witness the sunset. The reason to watch the sunset here is that there is water ponding on the surface of the salt, which affords some interesting photo opportunities. Back in Hamedela, we bedded down for the night on our outdoor wooden beds as the animals and people passed us by. There were many Afar men walking around Hamed Ela who were armed with Kalashnikovs. These men provide security for tourists in the area where many governments discourage travel. Throughout our stay in Dallol, we were accompanied by armed guards from the Afar tribe. In the morning, we headed out to see the main attraction of the area, namely the Dallol volcano, which at 45 meters or 150 feet below sea level is the lowest crater not underwater. The ephemeral Lake Assale is recharged and resurfaced by floods and groundwater emanating from the Ethiopian highlands. Racing across the salt flats, we passed through areas of very interesting salt polygons. The salt polygons varied from subtle to those with very pronounced edges. Nearing Dallol, the amazing salt pinnacles found in the salt valleys came into view. Apart from the Dallol volcano, we visited a number of other very interesting sites in the area. However, the very hot temperatures near 40 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit made walking about a very sweaty experience. We followed our armed Afar security guard up to the top of the low cinder cone Dallol volcano. As we neared the top of Dallol, the ground became much more colorful with bright yellows and deep reds rather than just the white of the salt flats. In fact, the name Dallol means colorful in the Afar language of the region. Cresting the summit, we got our first glimpse of the colorful landscape associated with Dallol's hydrothermal system. It was exciting to see our first active hydrothermal spring. Oh, you can see some water moving. Holy dude. We walked along a well-worn path across a Martian-like surface on our way to see the fantastic hydrothermal terraces. Unfortunately, not all visitors stick to established paths and cause unnecessary damage to this unique area. The vibrant colors are a result of groundwater being heated by magma and rising up to the surface. The salt carried up in the rising groundwater reacts with the volcanic materials to create dazzling colors. In the hottest and most acidic pools, sulfur and salt react to form bright yellow chimneys, whilst in the cooler pools, copper salts create bright turquoise coloration. The Dallol hydrothermal system results in terrain that looks like that of an alien planet and is completely unique on Earth. It's somewhat similar to the active hydrothermal zones like Yellowstone in the USA, but it is much hotter and its waters are much more acidic. In fact, Dallol's waters have an average pH of 0.2, which is almost unheard of in any natural setting. Dallol is highly dynamic. Active springs go inactive and new springs emerge in new places in the range of days, and this is also reflected in the colors of the site that change with time. Perhaps the most spectacular hydrothermal feature is the salt terrace ponds that descend in a cascade on the flank of a flat-top geyser ground. The pond water has high amounts of iron, magnesium, and sulfur, and a very low pH value near zero, which is equivalent to battery acid. The hydrothermal springs of Dallol discharge iron-containing brines that have the extreme characteristics of very low pH, very high salinity, high temperature, and a lack of oxygen. These extremes make Dallol a key system for astrobiological studies investigating the limits of life and how to identify extraterrestrial life forms. Some studies have concluded that there is no life in Dallol's multi-extreme ponds. Although Dallol is a natural system of exceptional beauty where unique geological processes occur, it is not yet included in UNESCO's World Heritage List. Hence, despite hundreds of tours visiting annually, Dallol is neither monitored nor protected. Other hydrothermal systems in the world, known for their colorful terraces and pools, such as Yellowstone, have their colors generated by biological activity, whilst in contrast, Dallol's colors are due to inorganic oxidization of the abundant iron phases. Near Dallol are the ruins of a potash mine that was abandoned in the 1960s. Interestingly, most of the building's walls were made of salt blocks. As the area is home to one of the world's biggest undeveloped potash deposits, a new potash project is underway to mine these deposits for the Asian market. The blistering temperature didn't lend itself to a long stay at Dallol's hydrothermal system despite its beauty, so we made our way back down to our vehicles for onward conveyance to the adjacent salt valleys. The salt valleys with their salt pinnacles are located on the southwest flank of the Dallol volcano. The impressive Salt Canyon landscape is punctuated by isolated buttes, pinnacles, and demoiselles. Stretches of the valley floor are covered with a sticky, salt-laden, mud-like surface, which makes for a messy cleanup. From a distance, the salt mountains look like they were made of rock. However, closer inspection shows that they are made of layers of salt. There are some fantastic salt formations, including one that looks remarkably like an equestrian statue. Like the well-known hoodoos, the salt pinnacles typically consist of relatively soft salt layers topped by a harder, less easily eroded layer that protects each column from the elements. Some of the salt formations look remarkably like a pile of Jenga blocks. Erosion over the eons has created salt pillars that are up to 40 meters high. Although there were many candidates, the best phallic salt peak was to be seen in the distance. Nearby the salt valleys is the Black Mountain, which gets its unusual color from its manganese-rich salts. We walked towards Black Mountain over the treacherous ground from the remains of a hot spring. The ground was patchy, with some areas being hard and some so soft that one could easily break through the surface to the underlying water. Hence we closely followed our Afar guard, who picked his way carefully along. Nearby Black Mountain, a steam-blasted eruption in 1926 formed a crater, which is now a lake. Soon we were off to see Asale Spring and Lake, aka the Yellow Lake. The Asale Spring activity started anew following an earthquake in January 2005. The springs erupt through the salt layers, forming small yellow fountains in the lake. The color of the water in the lake is due to dissolved iron salts, and there is no sulfurous odor. Our final stop was at the Asale Red Rocks, which jut out abruptly from the surface of the white salt flats. Depending on the time of day, there may be surface water overlying the salt, which makes for interesting reflections. Near the foot of Red Rocks, an incongruous waterhole has opened up in the salt surface. The waterhole is very salty, which means that just like the waters of the Dead Sea, one can easily float on the surface. However, the downside is that one emerges very salty in an area where washing off is a challenge to say the least. A visit to Dallol is rewarding as one gets to see unique geothermal features and traditional salt mining that is on its way out and into the history books. However, the extreme temperatures and primitive facilities make for an uncomfortable experience.
Take me somewhere nice.